winning is fantastic, and it's really fun to win an event. But really, when you say what are my favorite wins, I don't actually really remember the wins as much as I remember the rides.
Welcome to the Practical Horseman podcast, featuring conversations with respected riders, industry leaders, and horse care experts. The show is co-hosted by Practical Horseman editors, and our goal is to inform, educate, and inspire. I'm Julia Murphy, and this week's episode is with international 5-star eventer Will Faudree. At the 2022 Carolina International in March, I caught up with Will and spoke to him at his stalls, so you hear the goings-on of the event in the background, but who doesn't love that sound? During our conversation, Will told the story of his upbringing on a cattle ranch in Texas and how he actually started out riding Western. Later down the line, Will was inspired watching the 1988 Olympics and then watched a movie about eventing called Sylvester and never looked back. He speaks about his late mount, Antigua, who he calls his horse of a lifetime, as well as some of his biggest mentors. You'll also hear Will share tidbits from his lessons with students and how he uses visualization to teach, a tool many riders, including myself, find very helpful. One of my favorite parts of our conversation, which you heard part of in the intro, is when Will talked about how he doesn't necessarily remember wins, he remembers rides. I think this is something we can all relate to, because sometimes it doesn't matter if you ribbon, but you come off the course or out of the ring knowing that you and your horse had one hell of a ride and that all of your hard work came to fruition. And finally, Will goes into the importance of defining your values and sticking to them, because it's easy to get pulled in another direction. Before we dive into the podcast with Will, I'd like to thank the sponsor of this week's episode, Bimeda, and share their message. Bimeda might be the biggest animal health company you've never heard of until now. Bimeda's products have been trusted by veterinarians and owners since the 1960s, when their Irish roots began. Bimeda is one of the largest producers of dewormers like Equimax, Bimectin, and Exodus. World-renowned equine athletes also rely on polyglycan, a patented formula that replaces lost or damaged synovial fluid, and Confidence Ec pheromone gel, which reduces and prevents equine stress. Consult your vet today and visit bimedaus.com to see where to buy. Now, enjoy the episode with Will. So first of all, just thank you for taking the time to do this as we kick off the 2022 Carolina International.
Yep.
It looks a little different than last year because we had COVID last year and everyone was still wearing masks.
Yeah.
And I know the show office was still under construction, so I feel like the vibe here is a little different than it was last year.
It is, and it's nice that we actually were saying when we took the horses for our hand graze, it's so nice not to have to wear masks.
Yeah.
Walking around.
Yeah, I remember even out on cross country and everything and talking to you guys after, which we met for the first time actually last year at Carolina. I'm sure you don't remember that. But and you had a good run last year with Fun, right?
I did, yep, and he's back here again this year. So.
And I remember right after last year he had a little bit of an injury, right?
Yep.
And he's all recovered, he's feeling good.
Yeah, no, he's feeling good. It was just a minor little tweak, and luckily, my veterinarians are so on top of everything. We caught it before it was a serious issue, so he came back and was able to get to Maryland 5-star last autumn, and came out of that looking great. So we're headed. Hopefully, the aim is now to Kentucky in April. What do you think you'll do the 5-star with him at Kentucky?
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. And what do you think of Maryland? I was at Maryland too the inaugural year. It was so fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. They did a fantastic job, and it was really cool to see how that place is evolving.
Yeah. What do you think of the cross country? That was with all the hills out there. It was tough.
The terrain was so intense, and that fun. He's not the fastest horse in the world, and I think what made the terrain so difficult there was the hills were very steep, but they were very short. Mm-hmm. So you'd run up one, and then you'd run down one, but it wasn't down long enough to get them going again before they had to climb back up. So
yeah, and I feel like that backfield was miles and miles away. I know because we were lucky enough that we did have the crowds at the Maryland 5-star, and the crowds hiking up the hill all the way to the backfield by the water. It was crazy.
It was nuts.
But it was beautifully done. The course is great. And Ian Stark did the course there too, right?
Yeah, and he does it here.
He has this one. Have you been out there?
I did. I rode my bike around it yesterday, and it changes. It's changed from last year, but it's a lot to do, and
I'm looking forward to Saturday for sure.
Yeah, Ian always has good questions out there. He never makes it easy for you guys.
No.
So to start with some more questions, I always like to start with how you first even got into horses and horseback riding.
I was born on a cattle ranch in Texas, so I grew up riding Western and
no kidding.
Yeah, and doing ranch rodeo stuff and team roping, and I was always I am a bit the black sheep of the family, so I always wanted to do things a little bit different. And I had seen the 1988 Olympics jumping on TV, and I thought that was fascinating. And I was 8 years old, and so my parents signed me up for jumping lessons, and never looked back.
Wow,
really.
wow. Do you remember, I don't know off the top of my head, who was on that team that inspired you? Who did you watch?
Oh, I don't even remember. I think it was... Well, I do remember the American Greg Best, who won the individual silver that year. I didn't watch the eventing. I just watched the show jumping. I found out about eventing from a movie called Sylvester. It's a Western that she ends up going to Kentucky. They use... Brian O'Connor's in the film. It's a fascinating Western. So I saw that in '94, and I remember a friend of mine, someone told us about eventing and that there was a Karen O'Connor clinic in San Antonio, Texas. So we went and watched that, and then I was hooked on that.
They can make a movie about you too, from Western to Kentucky.
Yeah, well.
That's funny.
So that's how it all got started.
And then, like you said, you started Western, then did some jumping, and then moved on to eventing. And what has kept you in the sport for so long, even through all those different disciplines and changes?
Insanity. No. The love of the game, the love of the horse, the process. The partnerships with the animals. I was obsessed with it as a kid, obsessed with it in my early adulthood, and I'm 40 and I'm still obsessed with it.
Yeah.
You eat, sleep, and breathe it, and I'm always... There's a lot more lows than there are highs in the sport.
Yeah.
And I think that's in a lot of walks of life, but I said the process, the process and the partnerships and the friendships and the love of the game, really.
I always like to get into that too. Like you said, there's a lot of the time more lows than highs in this sport. So when you come across, say you're at an event and you don't do as well as you would have necessarily liked to, or you're just having you're in a slump, how do you keep yourself going? Like, what's your motivation?
To be better.
Yeah.
It's a challenge. To identify the issue, to acknowledge the issue, and to be aware of what the problem is and how can I fix that? And there's really no wrong way. Try something. If it doesn't work, don't try that way again. If it does, great. And and I think that's one of the things that I've taken in every aspect of my life is if I'm going to do something, I want to do it well. If I'm not going to put the time and effort in to do it well, I'm not going to start it.
Right.
I do not have the gift to be able to clean things. If I clean my car out, it looks dirtier after I'm finished than when I started. So I've tried for years to learn how to do that, and I've now just resigned to the fact that there are people that can clean cars way better than I can, and not meaning that I don't clean the car out. I don't try, but I'm not willing to go to school and put the time in to be good at that.
Right. Everyone has their thing that they're willing to put the time in.
Yeah,
for.
and when I put my mind to something, I put everything into it. I'm very loyal to the passion that it takes to do things. And so that's what keeps me going is loyalty and you finish what you start. If I start cleaning the car, I'll finish it, but I'm not very good at it, and I recognize
You should see my car right now. I get it. And what about mentors throughout your career? Could you name a few?
I mean, my biggest mentor would be Bobby Costello. He everything I've done that I'm really proud of in my career, he has been a part of that. I've ridden with him for 20 years. And so, so he would be, and I'm close with him and his family. I'm very much, so he would be a huge mentor, who I really look up to and who I'll call and bounce ideas off of. Right. And one of the biggest things that I've learned from him, I've learned a lot from him, but the passion and the respect, and the dedication to horsemanship, that's how I define how I run my business is, through the eyes of the horse. And Bobby's been a huge mentor and inspiration in that. And going from him, Philip Dutton is a huge, was a huge part of my career, starting my professional career. He found me Antigua, the horse that put me on the map. And I was a working student for him, so my barn operates. I learned so much from, at the time, his head groom, Colby Saddington, and Nat Barco Cox, who Nat is my barn manager, and so I learned a lot from those girls through Philip's program. Right. And then Karen and David O'Connor, they really were the ones that, Karen O'Connor was the first clinic I ever did, eventing, first time I ever jumped a cross-country jump. Wow. And, they were my young rider coaches, and, so those guys. And then, Mark Phillips and I was so young when I was 21 years old when I made the Pan Am team, and 22 when I went to Athens, and 24 when I went to the World Games in Aachen. And I was this kid on a really good horse. And I didn't really understand what a phenomenal chef to keep and guide Mark Phillips was. So he and his ex-wife Sandy Phillips would also be huge influences. Sandy's, my basis of knowledge in the dressage as a professional has really come from her. So those would be my top, who I, look up to and still look up to.
And you still work with a lot of them?
I haven't worked with Karen and David since David was the coach. I work with Sandy, I send her videos, and I work with her a couple times a year. I usually cry because she's so hard. But I don't really cry.
We all need a coach like that.
And Bobby is my, he comes to all the, I ride with him weekly.
Yeah, your go-to guy.
To this day, yeah.
And how do you feel when you come to events like this, international events, and like you said, Philip was one of your biggest mentors, and now you compete against him all the time? How does that feel?
It's an honor, really. Yeah. I grew up, Will Coleman and I were both working students for Karen and David when we were in our teens. I've gotten to know Doug Payne more as we've gotten older. I'm good friends with Boyd Martin, and there's a lot of camaraderie within our demographic.
Yeah.
And it's really inspiring and inspiring is a good word. It's it's, experience is what you get right after you need it. And those guys that have been around so long, they are just a wealth of knowledge and experience. And so it's so nice to have them to go to when we do run into a fork in the road.
Right.
And, have you tried this? Have you tried that? And so, it's an honor and a privilege, really.
And what about some of the most influential horses in your life? I know you just mentioned Antigua.
Antigua.
Right? Antigua.
Antigua, he was the horse that made me. And, I've said it in 1,000 interviews after the World Games. The late, great, wonderful Karen Stives told me, she said, don't expect your next horse to fill his shoes. And I've never forgotten that. It was just an offhanded comment at a birthday party. She didn't really even know me.
Right.
And that has stuck with me my entire career. And I've taken that with every horse that I've had. And I've learned something from every horse I've ever sat on. And so, I've had wonderful horses. After Antigua's career came to an end, it was 2008 was a bit of a rough year. I lost my grandmother, then Antigua retired. I mean, he was 19, and he had had an amazing career, and it was the right time. And then I lost my sister in November to cancer of 2008, and so I was kind of stuck. And and then Jennifer Mosing, who has been my longtime supporter, came on, and I've had many wonderful horses through her sponsorship and friendship. And if I could name all of them, I would, but the top ones would be Antigua, Paulo, Andromac. DHI Color Candy was, I never did a 5-star on him, but I learned a lot from him. And Amazing Fun is such a special horse to me. He was imported actually by Bobby, and then Bobby's career was coming to an end, and I took over the ride when he was just ready to move up to preliminary. And so it's been really fun to be a part of his career from the ground up. And I learned something from that horse every time I get on him. He always shows up to work. Mama's Magic Way is just one of the most talented and incredible horses I've ever ridden. His career is just really starting. He's 11 this year, and I'm really excited. He reminds me a lot of Antigua on the cross country face. He can be a bit. I'd like to describe him as a 3-year-old little boy at Disney World on the sugar high that got away from his parents. So he takes every tool in my box sometimes, but I'm committed to the process, and I love it, and it's something that so what we do. It's my job. I gotta think in slow motion and do it. So.
And what about some of your most favorable wins in your career? I mean, like you said, Athens, you accomplished so much when you were young. You're still accomplishing so much.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. Winning is fantastic, and it's really fun to win an event. But really, when you say what are my favorite wins, I don't actually really remember the wins as much as I remember the rides.
Right.
One of my favorite cross-country one of my favorite cross-country rounds, Andromac at Samir in 2013. I mean, she was just phenomenal, and I finished 5th in the event there. Mason at Tryon Forlong in 2020 after not having had a year, and it was really only his 3rd or 4th advanced, and he just was amazing. Antigua at Burley in 2007.
it was in badminton in '05. So I've had so many wonderful moments crossing the finish line, and that's been really fun. You know, like I said, it's always fun to win. It's fun to win on home turf. You know, I've won this event a couple of times. I've not won the 4 yet.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, but you know, so wins are always really special and they're really fun. But I wouldn't know what I couldn't name a win that, you know, I can name moments of that remind me why I do it.
That's fair, though. I mean, it really is all about the ride.
Yeah.
And, I mean, there's a certain feeling, whether you win or not, when you come off, whether it be a cross-country course or like a show jumping round or a 100 round, whatever discipline you're in, that you just know that you and your horse clicked in that time, and it just feels like you're on top of the world.
Yeah, and it's really fun to have those moments.
Yeah.
And if it comes with a win, that's awesome.
Cherry on top.
Yeah, but...
What about when you are out on, you know, I guess it doesn't even have to be necessarily a huge course, any course, whether it's a new horse or just an environment that makes you nervous. How do you deal with nerves, or even do you get nerves?
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
I work a lot with a sports psychologist. I speak with Abigail Lufkin monthly. And, you know, Karen O'Connor told me when I was a kid, you have to have butterflies, but they have to be flying in formation. Aww. And, you know, that's another saying that I've never forgotten.
I love that.
And one of my go-to things when my nerves start to overtake is I just tell myself to think in slow motion so I can do my job. And if I have a particular thing where I'm nervous and it's not healthy nerves, I have a box that I keep all my gear in, my coats and my stuff, and I have that mental image of I just put those nerves in the box and shut the door when I get on.
Wow.
And so they're here, but they're not going with me. So that's a real mental thing for me, and it's something that I've struggled with it, but I give my nerves to someone else when I get on and think in slow motion so I can do my job.
And do you think that's part of like a routine that you have, or is that just kind of a case-to-case basis?
It's a case-to-case basis, but you know, a case-to-case basis, but definitely a routine.
Yeah. Going into your training a little bit, like you said, you trained a few horses up from, you know, when they were young ones, and you've seen them come along. So when you are training, what is your philosophy?
I want my horse to understand it. I have to think about the psychology of the horse. You know, if we turn them loose in a 20 by 60 arena, they're not going to go half pass across the diagonal. So it's, you know, why? It's about so that they understand the game. And, you know, I was teaching a cross-country lesson the other day, and this woman said that the horse has a real big trachiner issue. And so I made her walk around it, and she said, well, I was told to never let him look in it. And I said, well, that's like me turning all the lights off and telling you to run down the stairs. Like, the horse has to see what it is that they're doing, and I want them to. I want them to look, assess it, you know, acknowledge what it is, and then jump it. They're not going to, if they're jumping it out of fear, it's going to end in tears. And, you know, and so we walked around it, and then I told her to trot it, and she thought I was insane. And he stopped at it, and I said, that's fine. I said, pet him. Let him know it's okay. Now walk around behind it again, turn right, trot it back the other way, stopped again, that's fine. Turn left, trot him, pat him. You know, sit the trot. I said, lengthen his rein, she's holding him. Lengthen his rein, he stops. And I said, just circle around again. I want you to lengthen your rein 6 inches. So she turns, and she's like coming to it, and she's me to that post from it. And I said, close your eyes. And she's sitting in the trot, and there's a loop in the rein, and the horse just popped right over it.
Wow.
And I said, he's got to see it and use his neck and use his body. They have to understand it. So that would be my philosophy is, not go sideways, but look at what you can do going sideways.
Interesting. I like that saying. You have a lot of good one-liners. When you are teaching people, what do you think your teaching style is?
I use a lot of images. I'm a real image person.
Mm-hmm.
I was teaching this girl a dressage lesson the other day, and it's this huge chestnut. It's got a real long back, and I said he's got to lift his stomach up. Like we always say, they've got to come back to front and go over their back, but they can't. If they got to do this with their belly.
Use their abs.
Yeah, So I was telling him, like, every time you post, you're bringing that inside hind leg with you, and every time you sit, you're bringing the outside, because that's when the hawk is coming forward. So think about that back to front. And then I couldn't figure it out, and I was like, I don't know why I'm thinking of basketball, because I'm not a basketball person, but maybe it's because the horse is orange. But I said, you've got to like dribble his abs. Like move your seat in rhythm with his hind leg, and so that he can move his back, so that he can lift his abs. And the minute I did that, and I was like, now imagine you're dribbling. You're just dribbling his back, and you want to dribble faster. You're going to go down to the ground and then go back up, and make him move his back. Make him move his body so the energy behind could come through. And it made sense to her, and it totally changed the horse.
Wow.
So I would say I'm a real visual instructor. That's how I would.
I'm a visual person too. It's so interesting to hear that from you. And I know a lot of people are, but it's like, I know for me as a rider, if you said that to me, it would be like the light bulb went on, So that's really, really cool. Yeah. And when you are working with students, do you ever find that there's like one issue with a lot of different students that you need to work on more, like a certain type of jump or a certain movement that you really need to like help students nail down?
Letting their necks go, lengthening their reins. The horse's balance comes from their head and neck. The horse is out in a field and they're running up a hill, their head's going to be down. When they're running down the hill, their head's going to be up. And we try to control so much, and especially on the cross country, but in all the phases. If you don't like where their neck is, move their body until their neck goes on the right way. And I was teaching a girl yesterday, and the horse gets really, really wound up in the show jumping, and I've never helped her before. She's here from Montana. And the horse has this, it's like a cobra neck. It just comes back at it, and she's doing this. And I said, when you use the rein, you're just giving him a springboard. He's using your hand as a springboard. It's like a little gymnast that runs down to the vault. Take the springboard away. He's got to use his neck. And that, she didn't get that. And I said, okay. I said, if you know those cartoons and the elephants are like walking and their bellies are going like this? And I said, move his rib cage left to right. The minute she did that, she could let go because his body was moving.
Right.
And I said, box his withers around with your thighs. Like, just move the saddle.
Yeah.
So that he can use his head and neck. Then all of a sudden, when she waited with the whole horse. Right? And I said, now don't use your hand to wait. Just suck your belly button to your spine. Use your stomach. She goes, oh my God, that works.
Yeah.
Like, they have to have their head and necks.
Yeah. I have a 3-year-old right now, and that's something that I'm kind of going through with him. I have to consciously remind myself because he's probably going to end up being like a hunter, and there's that perfect hunter headset, and I find myself I'm using too much hand. And I actually had a conversation with my mom the other day, and I was telling her how it finally clicked the other day with him, that I was just focusing too much on his head and not enough about getting his body and his rib cage moving. And as soon as I softened my hands and asked him to move through the rest of his body, it was incredible. And it just all came together.
Move their body.
Yeah. And for your lessons and when you're teaching, do you have any type of exercise that you like to use with all of your students or a lot of them?
It all changes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not really one. I like to watch the horse go, see their conformation if I don't know the horse. I usually start, you got to think left leg to left rein, right leg to right rein. We always think inside to outside, but if you don't have an outside, they're just going to fall, and they have to come through to both reins. So it's like, when you pick the reins up, it's like you should feel like you're pushing a wheelbarrow. And you don't push the wheelbarrow sitting in it. Pick it up, keep your position a fraction behind the motion, not against the motion, but be able to move them around this way, not this way.
Right.
So that's probably in all phases that I start with.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And just wrapping up a couple more questions, more personal questions, but and this one is always kind of a lot of riders don't know how to answer this one.
Okay.
But why do you think that you are so successful as a rider?
I don't think I am.
I get that a lot.
Why do I think I've, had I'm really fortunate. I've got a great, I've had really fantastic support, and I'm dedicated to the process. I'm dedicated to trying to be better every day, and so, if I ever feel like I've accomplished it, then I don't need to keep doing it, because you can always learn, and you're always learning.
Yeah.
So.
And what do you think is the hardest part of this sport? It is a hard sport.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be mentally, physically, emotionally.
I mean, physically, it's very demanding on our bodies. I'm 40 now. I don't, it takes me a minute to get up and get going in the mornings. Some people balance it really well. I haven't balanced a personal life versus my work life.
Right.
I think it is all about, it's all encompassing. It's all, it is our lives. And I think that, it's funny, I love tennis, specifically women's tennis. I watch it a lot. And I've got a handful of really favorite players, but one of them is Ash Barty from Australia, and she announced her retirement yesterday, and she's 25 years old, and she won Wimbledon last year. She won the Australian Open back in January, and she said a really interesting thing in there, and she said, my whole goal in my professional tennis life was to win Wimbledon, and I did, and that really changed my perspective on things. And I'm 25 years old, and I'm more than Ash Barty the athlete. I'm also Ash Barty the person, and I thought that's a really, really, hats off to her, because greed can take over, and I want more, and I want more, and I want more, and hats off to her. I said at my sister's funeral that Audrey Hepburn said it best, that a true woman knows when to bow out. No one will ever, a true woman won't fade out. They always know when to bow out. And I think, I keep that, that is also something that I think about. I'm not ready to do that yet. But when I am, I will. So I think that's what's hard. One of the hardest things about the sport is, yes, it's a hard sport. It requires a lot of time. It requires a lot of financial backing. It requires a lot of people, a team of people that can produce the result. And if you're doing it for results, you're not going to survive long, in my opinion. You have to do it for the process. So that would be the hard thing.
Yeah. And one last thing, if you could go back in time to younger you, what would you tell him about your career path, doing this, any piece of advice you would give your younger self?
Keep going. I wrote a paper during COVID for, I don't remember, it was on Eventing Nation, but it was a letter to your younger self. And I think in that, one of the things, I ended it, I ended the letter, all these dreams that you've had as a childhood are going to come true. And for me, they came true really early. But then what do you do beyond that? And to keep going. And it's not easy. It's not hard. It's not easy. It's, I struggled in my early 20s coming out of the closet. And that was a real difficult, growing up in West Texas, it's, that was a
really hard thing for me to accept it coming. It took me until I was 30 years old to be able to tell my family. And as I said in that letter, give them time. It took you 30 years to accept yourself. And, you should always accept and never expect. And treat every horse. Don't expect your next one to fill his shoes. Something I heard from an icon. And every horse you get on, you'll learn something. Enjoy them, but keep going, even when you think I can't go and I can't do this anymore. Keep going, and use the word off more often.
I might have to beep that one out.
But I say that a little bit jokingly is, to keep going and to honor your values and to stick to the truth of what you believe in, because it's real easy to get pulled in a direction one way or the other, and define your values and stick by those. And it took me a long time, going back to the whole coming out of the closet and all that. I had to define my values, and I would much rather be known for if I win, whatever, great, but I would, authenticity and horsemanship is my priority. And looking at my career through the eyes, looking at my job through the eyes of the horse, and that's my goal. Is when it doesn't go well, why? Let's figure this out. So.
This has been super excellent. What is next for you? I know you mentioned Kentucky. You're hoping for that for fun.
Yeah, so I go here. I then go on to the Fork in a couple weeks, and then Fun is going to Kentucky, and Monmouth Magic Way is going to Badminton.
Awesome.
So that will be
good luck.
I'm
so excited to see you run this weekend.
Hopefully.
Yeah, fingers crossed. You got to put the butterflies in the box.
I know. Oh, I will.
I really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode with Will Faudree, and a big thank you to the sponsor of this week's episode, Bimeda. Learn more at bimedaus.com. You can subscribe to the Practical Horseman podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen. While you're there, please rate and review the show. Also, tune into our new mini-sode series premiering this Sunday, April 3rd, called The Fod Pod. You'll hear audio lessons from our favorite Practical Horseman On Demand videos. At Practical Horseman On Demand, you can enjoy hundreds of how-to videos and get insider access to exclusive interviews and lectures, slow-motion demonstrations, and step-by-step tutorials taught by top-level pros in the hunter, jumper, equitation, and eventing disciplines. When you tune into the Fod Pod, listen closely for a promo code for 15% off your Practical Horseman On Demand subscription. Thanks again for listening to this week's episode. I'm Julia Murphy, and you've been listening to the Practical Horseman Podcast.